a distinct honor to introduce a sitting member of the United States Congress representing us here in Congressional District Number 1, Congressman Tom O'Halleran. We will start with a minute, give yourself a minute or so to introduce yourself, and then we'll take some questions from the audience. Hopefully, I'll have a chance to ask a couple myself, and then we'll conclude with concluding remarks.
That sounds great. Thank you for being here today. It's a pleasure to be here and hopefully answer as many questions as we can get in. This is your second former police officer in a row, and I did 14 years with the police department in Chicago. I then became a businessman, was a bond trader at the Chicago Board of Trade, served on their board of directors. After that, I became a consultant on the integration of technology and long-range planning into financial exchanges around the world. And then I retired, and as you can see right now, I'm a failure at retirement, and that's a good thing. I enjoy it. Why did I run for office? First of all, it's actually we ran for office. My wife Pat's here. We've been married 49 years, and you know, when you run for one of these positions, you don't do it alone. And the second part of that is our 4 grandchildren and our 3 adult children. We think we can have a better country if we continue to work together. Thank you.
So when's the big day for the 50th anniversary?
August 2nd. Did I get that right?
Yeah. I should never put you on the spot like that. I'm so sorry.
No, that's fine. I better know it.
I'd like to get things started just by asking your opinion on the mess that the Senate has created with this U.S. Supreme Court nomination.
Well, I'm disappointed. I believe that, first of all, the investigations prior to getting to this point should be complete and not partial. And it was obvious that some things potentially could have been uncovered earlier. Now we have a nominee that is in a situation where he can't prove right or wrong. We have a potential victim that can't prove what they had because we're so many years out. But for the most part, the purpose of the Senate or the Congress is to try to ask questions of the nominee or whoever else is in front of them with respect, with the ability to not be confrontational. I've been a strong proponent that we shouldn't have any political discussions during these types of processes, and we have to stop talking to one another at the table and talk about the issues that are relevant to the conversation. And so I think it's been I think we'll get over it. I think the Senate is a body that has a tendency to have to work with one another, and I think they will do that in the short term, but we have to look at ourselves in the mirror.
If you're representing us in the other chamber and in D.C. today, would you vote to confirm Judge Cavanaugh?
I didn't take a look at all the information, so I would think that given the amount of information I would have, you know, I'm very concerned about victims of crime. Not only I was a homicide detective, and we also dealt with sexual assault, and so having no knowledge of what the current investigation did, the last investigation, but I am a proponent of, for the most part, of if a president of the United States wants to put somebody forward for confirmation, then they should be able to get their person unless something is unqualifying.
Looks like we have some members of the audience lined up, so please.
Thank you for being here, Congressman. My question is about gun control, and I have a problem with the fact that there are so many children getting their hands on guns because they're unsecured by their parents. And I'd like to know how you feel about legal and financial liability for parents who don't secure their guns.
Well, legal liability is there already. I mean, if you are putting a gun in a place where a child is able to get a hold of that gun, it's negligence. I'm for the Second Amendment, but we have to think about safety and how we're going to address those issues in a family environment. The financial side of it, that's a little bit different. I would say on the face of it, the negligence side of it is where we should concentrate our efforts and not get involved in. I don't know what the finances of all these families are and what we're going to do to that family, but I do know that if there's negligence, the child services should be able to get involved and should get involved early on.
I think I will speak for myself, but I know I'm not alone in the sentiment that the party politics that we have today, as contentious and, in my view, as counterproductive as it is disgusting. And you're in a unique position because you've been on both sides of the aisle. You're a former Republican, currently serve as a Democrat. Can we have hope that this is going to change, or is this the new normal for us?
I hope it's not the new normal. I don't think it serves the American people very well. I think the job of leaders is one of uniting people, not separating people. We have to bring our citizens back to the table to be able to talk to one another, and especially their representatives have to be at that table. I'm a member of a group called the Problem Solvers, 24 Republicans, 24 Democrats. We work together every week and talk about some of the serious problems our nation is facing. If we come up with a common agreement on that, we send it to leadership and say, we think you should work on this. And in fact, on one of the health care issues, we sent that to the leadership in the Senate. The House wouldn't look at it. And they started to formulate a health care plan, Alexander and Murray, to be able to use that as a foundation of getting a health care bill through the Congress. And so there is a way for people to work together. When we get away from the table, we should act respectful to one another, both at the table and away from the table. And when you come back and you're able to talk to one another. If all it is about yelling and screaming, and we're pushing aside our major responsibilities and not focusing on the priority and the needs of the American people and the safety of our nation. And those are the issues that we have to find common ground on, or else we're going to continue this process of back and forth, who's ever in power, and looking backwards instead of forwards. Oh, we'll get back at them for what they did to us 10 years ago or 5 years ago. Both sides do it. We need to start looking forward and saying, how do we get from this point to this point? I know as a businessman, if I were here and I always looked back, I wouldn't be a businessman very long.
We have another question.
I'm glad you brought up the health care because that was my question. It seems there's programs for low income. The people with more money can afford it. The tweeners are sort of left out. What will be your fix for that? How would you go about?
Well, I've been a promoter of that. The program, the Affordable Care Act, had its problems. It seems to have been ironed out a little bit right now, but we cannot forget the people that are getting hit year after year, whether they're on a group plan or a private plan. And in order to do that, we have to take a look at the pharmaceutical industry, the insurance industry, those sectors that are like silos within the healthcare industry, and try to find why it works that way. I haven't found a common denominator there that says that these silos should be separated. There should be an integrated system that we know about, that has transparency to the public, that we're working on these issues, and be able to identify and educate the public on why one course of action is better than another course of action. I can say this, I've worked on a number of medical bills already. One of them's the donut hole for Medicare issues. Medicaid expansion. We don't have a sense as a population how important it is to have a Medicare expansion bill and using it, like 1.7 million people in Arizona use. And if they're not using that, they are adding to your bill and everybody else's bill when it comes time to renew your insurance program. So this is all intertwined. It's not separate pieces of one equation. It's every piece of this has a profound impact on the rest of it. And so, again, I would like Congress to take a year off and at the end of that year know exactly what we're talking about. And in the meantime, continue to identify how we can keep costs down because it's obvious. When I was in the legislature back in 2002, 2003, we were seeing in Arizona 15 to 20% increases in health care, long before the Affordable Care Act came along. Everybody saw that this was turning into a crisis. It is still a crisis today in America. It's not good for our families. It's not good for the American people. It's putting tremendous pressure on some of the most important programs that we have, Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid. And with those components in place, we have to find a way to understand that we have to provide care for the elderly. The families of America with their children, preventable care is necessary. Almost everybody has a pre-existing condition. And you can see the pressure that's put on families by the insurance companies, by government, and others. And we have to understand that before we just throw another idea out to the American people. I don't know if that answers your question enough, but I can look at you and say, there's no quick answer. I can't help you today. But if we do this right, we can help all of Americans tomorrow.
We have another question from an audience member.
My question regards to a comment that you made at another venue regarding the disparity between the average American and the Congress people, etc., who govern us, who have such a tremendous disparity in their coverage of many basic services, healthcare being, of course, one of those, not passing a budget, etc.
Well, not passing a budget, I think it's irresponsible of government not to pass their budget. It's one of the issues I work at all the time. Right now, we are off the month of October and into November till the 13th of November. We had just gotten back from being off all of August, the end of July, and the beginning of September. 6 weeks and now another 6 weeks. And we have the nerve to look at the American people and say, we just don't have enough time to get that done. We have enough time to go out and try to get ourselves reelected. Leadership should know that we have to identify the priorities of this country, and it's our responsibility to address those realities, not to just address our reelection and the power system that's out there right now and all this that you're seeing out there. We have to, if we're going to be truthful with the American people, then that's what we need to do, whether it's going to hurt us or not. And we also need to be acknowledged that leaders should not try to get into elected office if their way in is to be untruthful with the American people.
What are some of the issues affecting the city of Maricopa today that you could help with in the next 2 years if you're reelected?
Well, to give you an idea, one of the ideas in Congress was to do an infrastructure bill. I think we were all on board with that. Instead, they jumped to health care first, but then it went into the tax bill. Once that tax bill was accomplished, it wiped out our ability to have an infrastructure bill. The infrastructure bill was going to be $1.5 trillion. The tax cut in cost, because we had no money for it, in cost, initially people were told $1.5 trillion. Then the Office of Management Budget and others came forward, and the administration acknowledged that it's $1.8 trillion. And now it's up nearer to $2 trillion as interest rates go up. And then add on to that the interest. So we're really somewhere about $2.3 trillion. And that's why you see a proposal from the president to cut Medicare, Medicaid, and Medicaid by $1.8 trillion over the 10 years. And you know, that would devastate those programs. I don't mind you if you're going to do something, but just tell us what the alternative that you're going to bring forward. What is the solution you're going to bring forward to help keep the systems in place that provide for our citizens that are in need? Or nobody came to me or my wife or anybody else in this audience and said, could you sign a contract here that you agree that money can be taken out of your check for Medicare and for Social Security? No, once you do that, it's not an entitlement. It's a contractual obligation, whether signed or verbal or just acknowledged, that you owe something back. And that something back, you should have taken that into account long ago and made sure these systems were able to have the funding that's necessary to keep them going and the promise to the American people. And so we're going to struggle with this, whether it's infrastructure, but Maricopa needs that infrastructure. We've been working on the levy system here. We've been working on making sure some of the programs that are vital to Maricopa, whether it's community development block grants or Tiger grants, which are highway grants, or getting I-10 addressed. And I know you're doing the road into town here, but I-10 is a safety concern for everybody. We've been working with the administration on that. I just think we have to recognize that when you're cutting taxes, you're cutting revenue. And if you don't have any revenue to be able, when we were in the state, when we cut taxes, we cut them and took into account the revenue that was going to be needed. And we identified programs that were needed. I think I went over that. I was in the legislature for 8 years. But Congress has said, we will just cut taxes no matter what goes on over here. And no matter how much it's going to impact us, and we should tell the American people how much it's going to impact and what it means. I think that there's a lot of things we've been able to do in the omnibus bill here, and one of the profound things for me is we've raised military expenses quite a lot to get our soldiers up to a readiness level that they haven't been in a long time. But that is another issue that takes away from, it needs revenue and it takes away from our ability to address some other problems. So most of this gets down to funding, what we can do. What the levy, if we do the whole thing, is over $1 billion. And I-10, of course, isn't in that category, but it's taking human lives. I-17's in the same situation. These issues need to be resolved, and you can't do it by being there part-time, and you can't do it by not taking into account your needs for revenue versus the priorities of the country.
We have one final question, then we'll move to the statement.
Thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Question on border security. I know your opponent, I've seen one of her posters, and it says build the wall. I just wondered what your views are on border security.
I saw one of those signs coming in today. I've always been a proponent of securing our border. We have an obligation to do that as a country. But we've had ways of doing that technology-wise in some sectors for a long time. And we've increased that, and as we've increased it as a country, that's gone down. But you can build all the walls you want. If you don't take care of the visa program, then you haven't solved the problem. We have to clearly acknowledge that it has to be a comprehensive approach that has you can't look at this issue as all we need to do is build a wall. You have to look at it first from the perspective, I need water, but that's okay, of why why we're having this problem. There's an economy to our south that has a problem. The workers aren't being paid enough. They want to do what's right for their family. And we have a problem here of securing our borders and making sure our citizens are protected. I'm a former police officer. I've dealt with these issues for a long time. And I can tell you this, we need that trading partner to the south. We need good relationships with that trading partner. We need them to improve their economy so that this doesn't happen also. And they're going to get to 200 million people in not that long of a period of time. You know, I'm talking a few decades, but it's coming. We need to recognize that and what size trading partner they're going to be. And we also need to recognize that we have technology, we have boots on the ground, we have other mechanisms to address this. We also have to remember, as Democrats, we voted for some of that wall that's up there now. And they were part of a solution to, in major urban areas mostly, to preclude us from having tremendous problems with cross-border lack of security. But the Tohono O'odham, they have 80 miles of that border. They're not going to be willing to address and have a wall there. There are other sectors that you can't build a wall anyway because of whether private wall today. Some of the issues will go on for years just by making sure that are you going to condemn people's property and then pay them, or are you going to get a lease and work on that? Because these ranchers and these farms go right up to the border. And so it's a mechanism. If you don't have the amount of people on the ground to secure the border also, you can have people come over that wall day in and day out. There's always a way over a wall, or around it, or under it. But you're still flying people in 40% plus just by an airliner and with a visa. And they're free in our society from that point on. So let's get over the fact that I don't find many people in Washington willing to say to 11 or 12 million people, you're not going to be able to get permanent residency in our country. And if we're at that point, and that was a big hurdle in the past, let's get over it and move on and get this an issue that should have been resolved in 2013 when the Senate voted 78 to 22 that on an immigration bill, a comprehensive immigration bill. And the House leadership refused to put that bill on the floor. They knew it would pass. Everybody knew it would pass. But for whatever reason, this has now been 5 years since then, and we still have a contentious issue about the border. And we have to solve these issues. This is, I don't want another American life taken because of somebody that should not be here legally. But I also recognize the concerns of having a huge country to our south that we are going to have continual relationships with, and how to address those also at the same time. You know, I voted for a bill that said if you've been convicted of a felony in America, you should be gone. But if you've been here working for 10, 15, 20 years, you've been our neighbor, you're going to be checked on a 5-year basis to make sure you're still compliant with the law. And then maybe you can find a way to citizenship. Then we can have a good conversation on this. But bits and pieces are not going to work.
I have two very quick questions.
I don't have quick answers.
In one word, describe President Donald Trump.
I knew that was coming. In one word, I think well, it's hard on one word. I think that he is he has a vision, and then I'll follow that up with, I don't know that he knows how to work with the rest of the legislature on how to address that vision, or with his staff right now.
I'll give you a second chance.
I got around there.
In one word, describe President Barack Obama.
I think he worked hard to address our nation's issue. You know, Nobody in that office is ever going to be totally successful. And I disagreed with Obama and I disagree with Trump. But if Trump's message to us as American people is this is what we need, and I believe it's good for Congressional District 1, and I believe it's good for our country, then I'll be with the administration on that. And if it's not good for Congressional District 1 in our country, I will disagree with that. And that's what my voting records looked like when I've been in Congress. I'm a bipartisan person. I want to work with people. And if they have a good solution, I'm there. I think that politics plays too much. I have my own personal opinions, but my job is to work with people, not against people.
Thank you. And if you're so inclined, would you like to spend another minute just wrapping up?
Well, I just hope that the American people can start to recognize that their leadership process is also part of their responsibility. Please don't elect, whether it's me or somebody else, don't elect us based on our political party. Elect us to what we've actually done, to who we are, to what leadership capabilities we have, to identify clearly that we should be there for the American people. Just like I mentioned, I shouldn't be here all of October. Our work for the American people is back there. And I also want us to consider the long-term impact of this about our children. I'm very concerned about it. It's one of the reasons I ran. You know, Pat and I could have spent a lot of time traveling around also. We chose to work here in Arizona for the sake of our state and our country. And that is not being accomplished by your Congress. And we have to get that done, and we have to get more participation from people at the polling place. I don't care if you're Republican or Democrat, get to the polls and work, and vote, I should say, because or work for your candidate. Because if you don't, this is a republic. We have to have citizen participation in order to be able to understand the needs of the people of our country. And thank you for allowing me to be here. Pat and I enjoy this place tremendously. We enjoy Arizona. We've been here for 25 years, and I'm looking forward to continue to represent you in Congress. And so vote for Tom O'Halleran.
Congressman O'Halleran.